5 minutes. We know ourselves.
Okay, we are on and we are live. We're talking to Dr. Raúl Mora from Medellin, Colombia. So tell us who you are and tell us about micropapers because I'm interested in
Absolutely.
microlearning. Okay, go for
Yeah,
it.
always happy to talk to you, Peggy. People who may not know me, my name is Raúl A. Mora. I'm an associate professor of literacy studies at Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana, that's Catholic University here in Medellin, where in addition to teaching and doing research on literacy, I also coordinate a research lab that is called the Literacy in Second Languages Project. And I think the question of the micropapers dovetails directly with the existence of the lab. And I think it dovetails with one principle that one of my six rules, but one that I always say to all my students, this is going to um, save you behind when the time comes. And it's the rule that says, don't ever use a term you cannot define in your own words. So the micropapers, they come from two different sources. One is an idea I borrowed and I adapted from the Center for Intercultural Dialogue. It's a disciplinary research lab coordinated by Dr. Wendy Hervitz. And she has this series called the Key Concepts. And it has a similar structure, but it's one page. And at the time, I had already written a couple of key concept papers. And then I had a second issue that brought me to this. It was I had some of the students started to have to talk about literacy in different places. And I had a professor come and tell me, they just sound like they basically just repeating what they heard you say. And I'm like, okay, that's not good. That is not good because I want the students to really own the concepts, to really develop a sense of conceptual appropriation. Again, from the cultural historical activity theory notion of appropriation of these terms. I mean, we're going to talk about literacy, we're going to talk about video games. So that I said, I need something that they can, on the one hand, really develop ownership of the concepts. On the other hand, we can start developing a culture of writing in the research lab. And three, we can have a working document series that we can use, and we can also cite, and people can look at it and we can cite it as a quick frame of reference. And that brought me to the micropapers. And I don't even know how I came up with the name of micropapers, but I thought, like, yeah, this is short and it still has similar structures to papers and it still has an academic tone, and it was a way to introduce them to the process of academic writing. So the way we come with the micropapers, it's always on a kind of like, okay, we need one. It kind of goes like that. So if we're having a conversation, for example, I'll talk about the gaming project. So we have a conversation, we start talking about the different elements of a video game. And somebody says, well, there's the lore, there's the game elements, and it's okay. So I always tell them, okay, in that case, I need one of you to go and define what game elements are. And one of you has to go and define what lore is. And then we had this conversation about being a gamer. So, okay, we need to have at some point, in order to continue our work, a working definition of what we understand by gamer. And then we had also with time methodological papers coming in. So if we're talking about ethnography, then we should have a micropaper on ethnography. If we talk about do ethnography, then we should have one on do ethnography. Like recently, we wrote micropapers on critical literature reviews and meta-analyses because we are moving in that direction. And I think it's important to have those tidbits of information for the students and for the people who write it, because I'm happy to report we've had colleagues from the US and the UK also contributing.
That's right.
Like their own, giving us their own ideas for micropapers. So it's not just our students, we also have faculty contributions, and we're always open to people in the literacy community to contribute one. Just basically go through the same structure that we have, and that's the other thing. In addition to the structure, for the students, it's useful because it helps them get introduced to the notion of peer review. I mean, I'm not saying we do double blind, masked peer review, but there is a sense of peer review in the idea that just because they wrote it doesn't mean I'm just going to post it online.
So no, what's your process? Like, do you? Yeah.
Well, Well, the process begins with either proposing a micropaper or I'm gonna say imposing in a way. No, because sometimes I ask, I mean, I have it as a requirement. So, for example, on my master's students, one of their requirements, um, as they develop their master's thesis, is to write one micropaper. So, like for example, the micropaper on meta-analysis. That's one of my grad students because her thesis is a meta-analysis. So I said they need this. Um, and so every time they propose a concept, they propose an idea, I want them to write a micropaper so they can really wrap their mind around the concept. Because I think it's really easy when you can, if I give you 20 pages to develop a conceptual framework or develop a definition, I mean, you have a lot of room. But there are moments where you're not going to have 20 pages. You're not going to have a paragraph. There are moments where you're going to ask a question and you're going to have to answer it in 10 seconds, 5 seconds, one tweet. So,
right, like an
as
elevator
a academic,
thing.
we have to be able to move between the overextended version, the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson trilogy version of the definition, and the tweet, and the short version.
Yeah, exactly. Navigating those. And then,
So,
yeah, going back to the same ideas over and over, that will be helpful to them.
so that's how it always begins. So they propose the concept, or I suggest the concept. Sometimes in the middle of conversations with the teams, we realize we need a concept. So like, yeah, we're talking about like a research project. We have the routes on comics, fandom, and language exchange. Like, okay, we need to define those three. So I want micropapers on language exchange, on comics, and on fandom. And we have, at least for those three, we have two of them. The third one is under construction. And then the students writing. They write one draft, and I think usually the big challenge is, oh, it cannot go longer than one page. That always becomes a challenge. Right. Second challenge is always they start putting citations. You know, like, oh, this one, the rules here are no in-text. You have to have 3 references maximum. I mean, you have to have references. So I'm not going to accept a micropaper that has no references whatsoever. No, we have to have at least 1, ideally 2, preferably 3. So we can see that there is some reading behind this. But you shouldn't be citing in text. So it's more like, okay, it's not even paraphrasing, it's provide a working definition based on what you read. A definition that is 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs. Then there is a second section where they situate the definition in relation to our own work. So it kind of contextualize this in the context of the Literacy in Second Language project. And then there is a third section, I call it expanding second language research, because I mean, we're literacy in second languages project. So one of my concerns is navigating second language studies and literacy studies and bringing those together into a new field. So I always wanted to write some ideas and reflections on how this concept, how this term can help people who do research in second language studies and even second language teachers develop their work. And those have to be very concise, very down to earth. And I think that's one of the idea that they also begin to develop their voice, but develop their voice in a sense that it's them. I don't expect my researchers to sound anything they're not. I mean, so my researchers right now, in average, they're ranging between the age of 22, 23, and 35. I want them to sound like a 22-year-old junior in college majoring in language education. I want them to sound like a 26-year-old who just graduated from college. I want to sound like a 28, 29, 30-year-old, 31-year-old, 32 years old who's beginning their master's. I want it to sound like someone in their late 30s who's beginning their doctorate. I want it to sound, and again, in the sense of I want you to sound like who you are at this given moment. And then reflect who you are at this given moment in the writing, because and you know there's that sometimes we have this idea that whenever we write a paper we have to post. I mean, there's a lot of posturing, and I don't agree with the posturing. I think we can find our voice in an academic text without posturing so much, and I want them to get used to that, and I want them to get used to the fact that all the contributions we make to the field are equally important. But sometimes there is this big push for the high impact articles.
Oh, I know exactly what you
mean. The high impact articles, I mean, they're useful, but if they're going to be behind a paywall, who's going to benefit from that?
I know.
And
Yeah.
sometimes I've seen students telling me that they got more mileage out of looking at a definition on any given concept on a micropaper than in an article.
Right.
So that is a tangible contribution to the body of knowledge.
I
And
agree.
also validating that our students have a lot of knowledge to share. And I think also in the sense that since these are second language teachers,
Mhm.
that English is their second language, and they're getting into that, and they're at a point that they can create conceptual work
Mhm.
in English. That validates also the work they're doing in their capabilities as teachers and as scholars. That they're equally, I mean, they're capable of producing something that if we share it with colleagues, they can cite it in a paper, and can cite it in an article as a concept they can use. And I think
Right.
ultimately that's the idea, that people begin more and more to go and gravitate to the micropapers.
It's like a mini white paper,
Yeah,
or encyclopedia-ish, but not really.
exactly. It's exactly that's basically it.
Mhm.
But in the sense that we are writing these terms in our own words.
Mhm.
So there is, and like the first time a student writes a micropaper, they can take up to a month or 2 months. I had students doing 3, 4. I had to go with students doing 3 or 4 drafts the first time, and they have to go back and rewrite it until we get to a point. And I usually help a little bit with the editing process,
Mhm.
but making sure we retain the original idea they had in mind. And then
Mhm.
when I do a final sweep, I send it back to them and I say, okay, I think this is the version that it's good to go on the website. Um, if you agree with this, then let me know. If there is something you want to change, then let me know. And we'll, until such time that we're both happy, but especially until such time that they are happy with the final product.
Mhm.
Then it goes online and we advertise on social media. We make a tweet about it.
Oh, that's great.
And the beautiful thing is that the students are so proud.
Mm.
Even getting the first micropaper, it's a milestone. I mean, for everybody, like you can see the undergrads when they write their first micropaper, because I sometimes go on social media and they post it. Like it's for them is such an accomplishment to get their first publication. I mean, it counts as a publication. It's
Mhm.
not, again, it's not a peer-reviewed article,
Right.
but you can put on your CV as a web-based publication, so it counts. It
That's
counts as a
true.
working paper.
That's true. You know, our library now hosts that kind of publication, and it'll show up on Google Scholar.
Yeah, I've seen the micropapers popping up, and I've had cases where I've seen micropapers of ours appearing in peer-reviewed articles,
Mm. That's
and they use them
amazing.
extensively as part of the conversation. So that's always it's good to know.
So what are your topics? And I'll post a link, but what are your,
It's
like, I know, like, you can't rattle them all off.
it's anything related to. I mean, it's in general. We are right now doing 2 kinds. Ones that are more like I would say literacy related, and that would be kind of like 3 kinds. There are like we have some that are literacy concepts that we come to know over the years. So you can find micropapers on multimodality, on critical literacy, multiple literacies, digital literacy. Um, I don't. We may not have one. We have one on critical media literacy. We have one of those. Um, we had like concepts that we use in our research, like semiotics. I wrote one on indexicality. Um, and that was because I needed it for a publication. So it's like for a book chapter, I was going to talk about indexicality. Like, okay, let's go and write a micropaper, and then I go back to the data analysis.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Because that helped no. Because I mean, in that case, for example, together, and now we have a camera for my dogs, and putting together that micropaper was very helpful.
Yeah.
Then we have also moved into methodological micropapers. Methodological. So yeah, so it's more like things that are related to qualitative inquiry.
Yes.
So even if you go to our website, and Duncan is driving me crazy. Oh, hold on.
Life is 2020.
Oh boy.
Okay.
So yeah, as I was saying, I mean, we have some that are more, now we have started moving into more methodological. And in fact, if you go to our website, you can see that some of the ones that are methodological, they have like a little subscript that is just QI. So those are like qualitative inquiry papers. And we have papers on ethnography to ethnography, digital ethnography, participant observation.
You have a lot. Wow,
Yeah.
79.
79 and counting. And we have several in preparation.
Meta-analysis.
Our goal is to get to 100 by 2022.
Wow.
For the 10 years, for our first decade, we want to get to 100. That's our goal. Hopefully we get before that.
For submissions, and it's Creative Commons licensing.
Yeah. I decided to have a Creative Commons so we can use it, but then the Creative Commons that it's attribution, but no, I forgot the one that you cannot change it. But
right. Okay.
Yeah. So I thought it was useful to put the Creative Commons license there.
Mm-hmm. No derivatives. Yeah.
No derivatives. That's correct.
Okay.
So you can quote it, but you cannot modify it basically. And I thought it's useful because it's important. I also put it to help the students understand what Creative Commons licenses look like and what they're about, and their functionality in the publication world. Mm-hmm. So as I said, we have ones that are literacy related, ones that are a little more specific to our research. Mm-hmm. So like the ones we talk about gamer, or we talk about gamers as second language users, or gamers as second language teachers, or that is directly related to our research and the things that we're developing in conversation. Mm-hmm. And then we have the ones that are methodological, literacy, and research related, and our research related. And again, we always say that we welcome submissions. Anybody who wants to, especially like doctoral students or even faculty members who wanna. And we have some really nice contributions from faculty members, and I want to really get a moment here to thank some of the people, for example, who were at the time doctoral students at Florida State University under Shelby Whitty. Mm-hmm. They gave us some really nice contributions. We had a really nice paper on media literacy by doctors Keisha Bryan and Kathy Garland. Mm-hmm. We had a lovely paper on critical digital literacies by Earl Aguilera and Jessica Panja, like a very nice paper that I know people have read. And we have several others. And we are appreciative of the contributions because they also help. I mean, having the faculty members also helps show that this is not just a pet project, or that this is actually a serious editorial project, that it's small in size and it's small in scope, but it has it's expected to be used as a nice pedagogical tool for people who want to get a quick idea on literacy. I use them all the time in my class with my students, and some of them find the micropapers very helpful because again, it's easier to sometimes you just get the definition in 3 paragraphs. Oh, okay, I can get it. But because sometimes it takes, especially sometimes you read articles and it takes forever to get to the definition. Mm-hmm. Once you get to the definition, you may be so worn out by all the 4 pages before that you may get lost in translation, mm-hmm. so to speak.
There's so many uses for these. Yeah, I love that it's cross-disciplinary and then it's cross-pollinating.
Yeah, and it's also part, and I would say, because I presented about this, that it's also part of our entire writing structure. Mm-hmm. So kind of like the idea is that we use the micropapers as a way to get them introduced into the other process of the other writing that we're doing, like all the book chapters and the articles that we're working on. That always there's co-author, but kind of like the micropaper is a good way for some students to get the writing started, or could complement the writing, as is the case with the grad students. So it's integrated, it's woven into our entire writing structure. Mm-hmm. So it's not an isolated event from the rest, it's part of it. And it's a necessary part of that. So as I said, sometimes, and I hear sometimes you hear students struggling to define concepts. Mm-hmm. So they either resort to whatever they heard the professor say, or they just start trying to throw an endless number of citations to kind of, mm-hmm. I don't know if it's to obfuscate the argument, mm-hmm. or to try to impress with the argument. And like, no, don't go for impressing or obfuscation. Go keep it simple and keep it in your own words.
Yeah, I like that.
And keep it honest.
Yeah. So many writing skills you're teaching: synthesizing, connecting, mm-hmm. Summarizing, of course. But some of these are very expansive, like topics that are underexplored, like even like slam poetry. I'm just looking here. How often do we talk about it in literacy? A little bit, I think.
Yeah, a little bit, but again, in all the micropapers serve a purpose. Even if I were to look back at all the papers from number 1 all the way to number 79, for example, there is one micropaper that's on literacy. And that's specifically because one student asked me, Marjorie, I think you met her once at LRA. She's like, yeah, but Professor, what's literacy? Really? Can you give us a definition? So literally, she quizzed me like, can you give me a definition? Like, yeah, I should give you a definition. And I decided to write a micropaper because that question popped up. So we use the micropaper sometimes to answer students' questions in a way that, like, sometimes they even, I even force myself to write micropapers because, we have talked a lot about this.
Yeah, when you say literacy, what do you mean?
Yeah, like, for example, I can think of several papers I've written because, we talk about this all the time, but we don't have a good definition. Literacy is one. I also think about the one on polyangulation. That's one of our central points of our research. But we talked about it like, okay, we don't have a micropaper that defines it. So let's create one because everybody needs to have some clarity in this sense. And that goes with every term. Because sometimes we start discussing the terms and sometimes they become commonplace. And when they become commonplace, then we don't have a definition anymore. Everybody takes for granted, everybody understands them. And then we realize that nobody did.
Right.
Nobody does. It's like, and sometimes it happens a lot in our fields that, we all take for kind of like, yeah, we assume we know the secret handshake. And then we realize, like, so what's the secret handshake? Like, well, you know. Like,
exactly.
And then it's like, and like, no, I don't know.
Right.
Like, what do you mean you don't know the secret handshake? And so, do you know the secret handshake? Like, well, like, and it goes like that. It goes on and on. And we kind of all play the same trick that we know the secret handshake, but nobody does.
Right.
And I think it's important to get the students to learn. If you're gonna throw those words, you're gonna use those concepts, you're gonna use the terminology, then make sure you can come up with a definition in a heartbeat.
Well, this one looks really interesting. Tattoo as literacy practice.
Oh yeah, that one, for example, came out as a consequence of our research. So we were talking about tattoos. Okay, we need to talk. So as we talked about the routes, we need to start defining them. So every micropaper has a reason for being there. So it's not, I can't think of it in the 79 that it was like, maybe we just write this for the heck of it. No, I think all of them have a purpose. Some of the ones I write sometimes it's more like it could be whimsical in the sense of I need to write this paper now, but not whimsical in the sense of it doesn't fit anywhere in the overall structure. Sometimes it's like I come up, and sometimes I can confess, in my case, I have used micropapers sometimes to get myself out of a rut. Those times when you seem like kind of have like a little bit of a writer's block thing. So I go back into that to help me get out of that and get my writing flowing again. I have done this. I have resorted to that as a way to get myself back on track. But even if I do it like that, the micropaper I choose to write, it still fits within the overall purpose. So I'm not going to write a micropaper that has nothing to do with anything we're doing just because, I need to get myself out of the writer's block. No, there has to serve a purpose because then now, for example, when we have new students coming into the projects, the first thing we tell them is, okay, go back and read micropaper 1, 5, 7, 12, and get yourself acquainted with the framework.
That's great. You're building common ground. Yeah, that's great. I love it. Okay, well, to wrap up, do you have any advice for anyone who wants to do micropapers in their teaching practice?
I would say, first of all, have a purpose for them. So make them serve a purpose. Make them serve a learning purpose, a writing purpose, a research purpose, but don't, again, as I said, as I said in my case, I have been whimsical at writing them, but not random. So the wins are not random. The wins are part of the whole structure. So there is a sense of purpose.
Right. These are definitely not busy work.
So that. Second, always play it. Always try to go for short. Make it a true exercise in micro writing. And that can later serve as a trigger for something else. But also, even if it's a trigger for something else, that it can stand on its own 2 legs. Because sometimes it's like what happens that we do sometimes micro writing because it's gonna serve us for later. But what happens to what you did now? Can you build from there? Can that turn into something we can show?
That's great.
Because that's the other thing. Like sometimes we do a lot of writing in class that the idea is it's a well-conceived idea, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And when you start doing that in class, your students start getting discouraged about the act of writing. The act of writing goes somewhere, takes you somewhere, then you want to write more. But if the writing takes you nowhere, and I mean literally nowhere, then at some point you're gonna start getting discouraged from writing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of building success on success.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. And I'm gonna put the link.
All righty.
So,
awesome.